Being the logical corporate world, there is hardly any space for ghost stories and theories. However, this is one I can't ignore. I'm a 27-year-old male, and I work as an operations manager for a multi-service company. I work on the 17th floor of a massive high-rise office building in the middle of a town. Most days, I waste away with my spreadsheets and inventory, passing the day in front of my computer. Other days, I can actually visit my sites and talk to my staff. I do have staff members in the building, but only 4 of them, and I rarely see them as they're generally on other floors and hard at work. After only 2 weeks of being with the company, I realized that 3 of the floors have no tenants. Just 800 square meters of empty, dark rooms filled with thin walls and dark blue carpets. Each floor has 3 bathrooms, a male, a female, and a handicap, which we service only once a month if there's no tenants in the floors. All seemed normal until one day, my elevator ride from my office floor to the ground was unintentionally stopped at one of the empty floors. I poked my head out of the elevator, thinking that there was someone getting on, only to notice that we'd stopped on floor 14, the uninhabited floor. My body went cold as I stared into the empty hallway, noticing nobody around. I crept back into the elevator and looked at the buttons to see if I accidentally pressed it. But no, nothing. The only floor glowing was the ground floor. Strange. I pressed the close door button, but the elevator wouldn't close, so I began to panic. I stepped out of the elevator and pressed the outside button, hoping another elevator would show up. I stood quiet for a moment and watched as the elevator I had just exited from started closing, and I wasn't quick enough to grab the door. There I stood, alone and in the dark, next to the empty office and the eerie sound of the wind blowing against the building. I bolted for the fire escape stairs when I heard it, the chilling sound of a bathroom stall door closing in the female bathrooms. I stopped for a moment and turned to face the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, and the wind was blowing through it. I was immediately horrified. You see, the door is one of those hydraulic doors that close on its own. Someone had to be holding it open from the inside. I panicked and ran out of the fire escape doors, down the stairs all the way down to the ground. In a huff, I ran to security to go back to the floor and check out the bathroom. The security guard thought I had gone mad, as the floor was empty, and he just assumed someone from another office came down for a more private bathroom break. We got to the floor and walked all around. Nobody was in the women's bathroom or men's bathroom. Who could it have been? I asked security, and they said they would check the tapes and get back to me. What really creeped me out is that all of the stall doors were locked. Maintenance hasn't unlocked it since there were no tenants. A few days had passed, and I'd completely forgotten about the experience. I was back to my normal programming of sitting behind a desk and focusing on the logical processes of my day. A late Friday afternoon, I get a knock on my door from 3 of the security, asking me to confirm my story from a couple days ago. I explained myself again and told them what I'd seen, and they stared at each other in a rather weird manner. I asked them what was going on, and they explained to me the following. Nobody came to the floor. The security footage didn't catch anyone on that floor, not even me. I stood in silence. They asked if I was sure it was on floor 14. I was certain of it. Each floor has a sign. They assured me that they checked the floor to see where I'd popped up, but nothing. Here's where it gets even more intense. There are tapes of me walking out of the elevator on the ground floor, normal and mundane. I asked the security for the footage, and that's when I saw it. On the top right corner of the camera, facing the doors on the office of floor 14, there was a face of a woman. I knew she was there, and I know she exists. And now, I've lost 17 kilograms in the last 2 months, as I no longer take the elevators. This happened to me around May 2011. For some background information, I was born and raised in Alaska, Anchorage specifically, and I decided to start my undergrad studies in a small college town in Montana. Due to many financial pitfalls, my family and I decided that moving back home and going to school locally would be our best bet. The academic year wrapped up, and my mom flew down to meet me for our road trip through Canada, before re-entering the US on the Alaskan side. Of course, because I'd intended on living in Montana for 4 years, there was a lot of junk in my car weighing it down, so I wasn't keen on speeding through unfamiliar roadways. The first day or so was great. My mom and I stopped here and there and did some shopping in a few larger Canadian cities. Overall, we made a point of traveling mostly during daylight hours, but during the early mornings and evenings, I usually drove. My mom had eye surgery about a year before all of this, so her eyesight tends not to be so great at night. So on the third night, I'm driving us to our hotel in Dawson, and things are going fine, but we are a bit behind schedule, and it's getting dark faster than I would have liked. Somewhere after Stewart Crossing, we end up with this guy tailgating us with his high beams on. I'm kind of annoyed because I was already going nearly 10 kilometers over the speed limit. So I move to the side and wait for the guy to go around me. I would also like to point out that this was a single-lane, two-way road with nearly no traffic. Despite me getting out of the way and waiting for this guy to go around, he seems to mimic my movements, staying right behind me, even as I'm almost off the road. By now, I feel this heavy, cold feeling in the pit of my gut, and my mom started panicking. As I've said before, the woman's blind as a bat in the dark, and I was having a fairly hard time making out anything in my mirrors with this guy's high beams blinding me. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a make or model of the vehicle, let alone a license plate or anything about the driver. This all continued on for a while. I dropped down to the speed limit, sort of putting my foot down and saying, if he or she wants to speed, go around me. And still, the high beaming and tailgating continued, despite everyone else on the other side of the road flashing their beams at him. As we were getting closer to civilization, or at least Arlington, my mom told me just to speed up and lose him. The driver suddenly sped up, as if sensing I was now actively fleeing, and he attempted to ram us from the rear driver's side. It might have been sheer luck that they missed, or it was that I accelerated just faster than them. As all of this was happening, my mom was attempting to get a call through to emergency services, but neither of our phones had signals. We have a local carrier, but even in Montana, the service was terrible. By now, I'm easily breaking the speed limit by at least 20. That was when the engine behind me started revving up, and the large vehicle, which was an SUV, zips around us and suddenly slams on their brakes with their vehicle diagonal to us. I slammed on my brakes in response and nearly lost control as I almost drove off the road. In the passenger seat, my mom is now screaming hysterically, but I barely noticed at the time. In front of me, I could make out several figures in the SUV. Only, I wasn't terribly focused on it much. All I remember was practically seeing red before shifting in reverse and hitting the gas before shifting back into drive and speeding forward. I narrowly missed the back end of the SUV and escaped. After that, I wasn't entirely sure what happened. I was speeding off and the vehicle was still following, but much further back. They disappeared into some street, and my mom and I debated going to the police. We stopped at the first place with lights on, a hotel, and my mom ran to use the phone. I waited in the car, trembling from the rush and anxious in case the SUV was still prowling around. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just some asshole teenagers who didn't understand driver etiquette or how to drive around someone. Maybe it was just a prank. I also considered it might have been related to insurance. But they seemed more interested in forcing me off the road than making me hit them. In the end, nothing was or could be done by the local police. So my mom and I hurried back into Dawson, alone and paranoid. Last year, I started law school in Los Angeles. I have never lived in a big city before, but I was really excited to be in a massive city with over 4 million people. Ever since I was little, I always knew I had a half-sister in LA, but my parents had this weird anger towards her that made it feel like a taboo topic. Of course, I'd looked her up on social media, so I knew what she looked like, but that was about all. We never actually met. She was never that active on social media, so there wasn't a lot to see. Out of nowhere, one day in my first year of law school, I got a friend request on Facebook from my sister. Her profile seemed legitimate. She had Facebook friends, and her profile picture looked like her. She sent me a message, inviting me to a little dinner party at the park with her friends. We could finally meet each other for the first time. And since I was new to LA, and still am, I had no idea which parts of the city to avoid at night. I was so excited about the idea, but I had a lot of anxiety about it too. It would be nice if we met, totally clicked, and became besties for life. But what if we ended up sobbing like we were in some dramatic movie scene? What if I tried to talk to her and she just didn't click with me, and she started showing attitude? Or worse, what if it's all going well until we have some kind of disagreement? Someone said something hurtful, and then we both cry in front of everyone. Honestly, if she had suggested a cozy little bakery for desserts instead, I would have gone. But going to a park with other people didn't feel right. I thought it was like such a precious moment that I didn't want to have in front of these other people. And with all of that, I couldn't bring myself to go. I didn't want to risk having a meltdown in front of other people. I was worried about how messy it could get. A few weeks later, I googled that park just to see what it was like. Maybe we could meet up there together, just one-on-one. That's when I learned something was wrong. I won't say the name of the park, but anyone who has lived in LA for long will tell you that it is not a safe place for girls to be having a dinner party at night. The area surrounding that park has a very high violent crime rate. It's controlled by gangs. Even people who do illegal business in that park are forced to pay a tax to the gang in exchange for being left alone. So now, I was really concerned and curious. I tried to get a hold of my sister myself. She was an undergrad at the time, at a local college. I had a friend who went to her school. I asked my friend to reach out to her on campus and asked if she'd be okay with us meeting. They connected and us three met at my friend's house. It was great. It went along so well. My friend was also very happy to do that for us. The three of us had so much fun. We weren't bursting into tears, but we let out a few. We had dinner, we watched a movie, and spent the night at my friend's house. When I told my sister the whole thing, she said she hadn't used Facebook since high school, so clearly it was someone impersonating her. I would have told her to report the fake account, but it was already deleted. She knew that she'd been impersonated on social media, though. Another one of her friends had been scammed by someone pretending to be her. It was some scheme involving fake concert tickets or something like that. So yeah, someone had been impersonating my sister, they knew I was in town, and they literally tried to lure me into the most dangerous part of LA at night. I have no idea what their motives were, and I don't know if I ever want to find out. Meeting my sister after all these years was beautiful, but the whole backdrop was terrifying.